Hey guys, our guest today is a speaker, trainer, and coach focusing on mental health and recovery from addiction. His mission is to help create a solution to normalizing mental health and addiction by making coaching, counseling, and other mental health and addiction supports as common as going to the gym, hiring a personal trainer, or going to a group fitness class. Welcome to the show, the host of the High Cost of Anonymity podcast, Preston Moore.
What up, my dude? Thanks for the intro. I appreciate you having me here.
We need some flashing lights and a big runway for you to walk out.
You mean not my mother-in-law's not my mother-in-law's sewing room?
Hey, I was wondering if it was your sewing room.
Although it's very organized, very color-coded, yeah.
I didn't even think about it until you pointed it out. Yeah, I got the football collection. Anyone who's watching us on YouTube right now can see, obviously, the Buffalo and the Bills Mafia gear. But, man, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to be here. I believe we originally connected on LinkedIn, which is pretty much everyone that's on the podcast lately is just coming through my LinkedIn. So that is my channel. That is my sourcing. I don't even remember how the heck it started, but you and I were talking kind of, candidly about your podcast. Again, your podcast is doing really well on Apple, Spotify, Google, Anchor. Again, it's the High Cost of Anonymity. And we're going to talk exactly about what your cause is and doing your show. But we were talking about your show, and then you started telling me about your story. And that's really why I wanted you to come on here today. A lot of times the underlying theme of Mic'd Up is really comeback stories. And you have a tremendous one. So we're going to dive right into that. But if you want to kind of give us a little bit about the podcast and your purpose behind it, let's start right there.
Sure. Yeah, appreciate that. Appreciate the intro. I think part of the premise, Mike, is we've got a big problem on our hands culturally, and that is that everyone thinks that everyone else has it together and they don't. Mm-hmm. That it's easy for them and it's hard for me. That their relationship is amazing and mine isn't, that their bank account is right, that their passion and purpose is right and mine isn't. Mm-hmm. And so one of my, goals is to have these candid conversations around mental health, addiction, counseling, support groups, etc. So people get to experience what I got to experience and have for the last 20 years in 12-step recovery rooms like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, ACA. Whereas when I hear you share a story or a struggle, mm-hmm. now that gives me permission to share, to share a struggle. And what's also interesting, and I do it all the time, even still today, is when I look at you, I make all these assumptions. Like I said, I think you got it all together. I think it's easier for you. If I just had Mike's life, then I would feel so much better. And so, when we have these conversations, a lot of it is what I would call a solo cast, where I talk about, my personal development, fathering, husbanding. I've experienced some anxiety and depression and some mental health struggles with the COVID shutdown over the last year that I've never had. And so I feel like if we can make these conversations normal and get more people open to hiring a coach, hiring a basic counselor, hiring a therapist, going to group supports, that is how we move the conversation forward in normalizing mental health and addiction. It's not necessarily, even though I don't want to, I think marches are great. I think, normalizing, heroin addiction and overdose awareness and, these extreme mental health challenges, it's important that people know about it, but the vast majority of people will never need that high level, what we would call in the business, acute mental health or acute, rehab for alcohol and drugs. 90% of people just need a counselor, but they're too embarrassed to talk. Right. They don't even know it exists. So it's like, let's have these conversations, let people eavesdrop on what we got going on. And maybe they go, you know what, I think I'm going to hire someone. So that's my goal and purpose behind the podcast. And I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it sounds almost like, when you can get someone out of their isolation and into a group with other people that are relatable. I think the key word there is relation and relatable. Yep. And when others are telling their story and you go, man, that sounds a lot like me, or I can relate to that. Or Wow, that's even deeper and darker. I thought my act was not quite together, and
Right.
like, not that you're judging, but you're just saying, wow, I feel for this guy. I've had that happen to me too. I'm kind of having a morbid day or what feels like one, and then all of a sudden I hear another story and I'm like, wow, that just put things in perspective real quick. So would you say get someone out of isolation? Maybe that word's too strong, but especially in the pandemic, I know suicide rates are higher as well because people are kind of stuck being physically distanced. Talk about that, the group environment that really breeds, like community is really a big aspect.
Well, I mean, Mike, I'm a biased fan of group recovery and group support. When I was a young man, I used to get into a lot of trouble. I got arrested 4 times in 3 years from the time I was 17 to 20. The state of Texas insisted that I quit drinking and driving and doing drugs and selling drugs. And if I didn't, I was going to come stay at one of their gray bar hotels, and I didn't want to do that. And so I got sober through like what would be considered a rehab after work, which is like a group therapy type model. And then I got introduced to a 12-step fellowship, which Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous are 2 most common. And I just had such a it was such a good experience for me because our parents used to tell us this back in the day, which is birds of a feather. What do?
Flock together.
Flock together. That's right. And that is so true. Not only, when a parent or grandparent is trying to teach their child about, who you're hanging out with, but it happens with adults. In other words, I hang around with my people, right? I attract people that live and act like me. They may look different. They may be socioeconomically a little bit different. They may be successful or less successful than me, but emotionally, mentally, the things that we're interested in, we hang out with them, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I'm a heavy drinker, I typically hang with heavy drinkers, even though I might not be an alcoholic. And so what happens is it becomes normal how they handle life situations. And I'm talking basic life situations like parenting, husbanding, relationshiping, working, right? And so most people go, hey, Mike, let me tell you what's going on. They talk to their friends, but that's like the blind leading the blind. They're in the same boat. They don't know what's up, right?
It's almost like that group has their own rule, their set of rules.
Yeah,
and kind of like it's common denominators, good, bad, or ugly. And if like there's 10 people that are all kind of within that feel, if no one's like reaching out of it, you're kind of all keeping each other here. And that goes whether it's addiction or I feel like that's just really in society where when you're with a tight-knit group, if there's that friend who starts to do better, maybe they got into a bigger school, they're 18, now they're in a better school, and all of a sudden they get their act together. It's like this weird thing where the group tries to pull you back in, and that person's like, it's not that they're trying to say, hey, I'm better than you, but maybe there's antics that are going on that they're just like, I really want to get out of that and get in, start hanging out with people who are now vibrating at the levels that they're at, which may be in business or in society.
And I think, Mike, if you go at a deeper level, I mean, it happens in business. It happens in every area. It happens in religious organizations. It happens all over. And it's not that they are trying to pull them down. It's that when someone does something different, it is odd, right? And so the group has to make sense of it. Yeah. And so when someone goes, to use your example, they're going to go out of state or they're going to go hang out with someone else. They have to make sense of it. And one of the things they do on a negative side is, they think they're better than us, which may or may not be true. A healthy perspective would be to be able to feel secure enough in yourself to be able to encourage them. But I think one of the biggest trappings, Mike, is when I cannot remember the law. Joe Rogan always talked about it, but we can only kind of be relatively intimate with about 100 to 150 people. In other words, friends, whether it's close friends, acquaintances, we can only remember or hang around with about 100 to 150. And so what we do is we start to say things like, hey, this is normal, right? This is how you handle relationships. This is how you handle parenting. This is how we drink. That's normal. I don't drink any different than anyone else. But what I realized, particularly around drugs and alcohol, was I was 21 years old from 1 month. I've never had a legal drink of alcohol because even when I was 21, I was on probation and wasn't supposed to be in bars and drinking anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But this really weird thing happened was my father was a newspaper publisher. So he would get invited to these galas and we would, wear a tuxedo. And that was probably one of the coolest things about my dad was he could hang out, in the rough area of town with the blue collar guys, and he could be, in a tuxedo the next week at a gala. Right. And I always admired that. But I remember being at that gala and thinking that when I used to be there and we'd hang out around the kind of bar and we were around the fun people, right? And it was like going on and popping and I thought everybody wanted to be around us. But I thought in my mind, everybody was partying the way we were partying. And when I had been sober, this is after being sober about 2 years, I kind of looked and I'm going, 75% of the room is not acting like the people in the corner. Yeah. 75% of the people in the room are chilling, having a couple drinks, no big deal. But those people in that kind of 25%, which are kind of the heavy drinkers, maybe the people that overdo it or maybe even alcoholic and drug addicts, in their circle, that's normal, right? And so if we don't get outside of our bubble and ask for help and say, hey, Mike, have you ever done any couples counseling? Hey, Mike, you ever had or even more importantly, you're comfortable enough to say, hey, I've got a life coach, or hey, I go see a therapist. It's really great. If you ever have any questions, let me know. And so, that's one of the biggest things that I talk to people about is how do I break my anonymity, or how do I share with people in a responsible and productive way that I've got experience in mental health and addiction, and they can ask me for help without making them uncomfortable, without kind of overdoing it. In other words, in sales, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it's kind of like trying to ask if people are thirsty. The strategy is you go around and you say, are you thirsty? Are you thirsty? Are you thirsty? And you just keep asking until someone says yes. The most salespeople, they go, are you thirsty? Are you sure you're not thirsty? No, come on, just say, it's really good. I mean, come on. And they try to shove it down their throat, right? It happens in all kind of sales, business situations.
Right.
And so
for an amateur salesperson, I'm going to add that.
That's right. That's right. And so, and so that is kind of one thing that I do quite a bit in one way, shape, or form. I try to drop it in a conversation, whether it's with a stranger or someone that I've been around for a while, is, hey, by the way, I used to get in a lot of trouble when I was younger, been sober a long time. My family has a lot of experience with mental health and addiction, relationship counseling. If you ever know someone, this is important. I don't ever go, Mike, if you ever want to, talk about it, that's too direct. People's walls go up, right? So if I go, hey, Mike, if you ever know someone that's struggling, you can give them my number, ask me for help. Anyway, hey, let's get back to our coffee, or, hey, you ready to go? Let's get... And so it's this real indirect few lines telling people I have experience in that area. You have permission to ask me questions or give my number out. And the vast majority of people go, oh, interesting. And they roll on about it. But you get those people that go, what did you say? You're speaking differently than most people. And they'll either sucker back or they go, oh, my cousin, or, And
you ever have someone who kind of like played the game of, yeah, that's not for me, or I don't know anyone. And then like a week later you get a text message, hey man, appreciate you bringing that up. I really need your help.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really more, this is just a skill that built to 20 years in sales and being sober a long time is, I just assume people are going to, say, oh, that's not what I need. Because here's the thing, going back to this idea of, only about 10% of people struggle with real alcohol and drug addiction, right? The rest are kind of heavy to moderate drinkers. And then if you go too direct with someone, because their walls go up, or to go, hey, I've got a lot of experience with relationship counseling, right? They're going, what are you saying? I got a bad What I do, it's very in passing. And my goal is not necessarily for them. It's who do you know? Maybe you know someone.
Yeah.
And so if I can, one of these books that a lot of people read is called Being a Fisher of Men, right? So I just throw those hooks out. Used to, I would kind of, hit them over the head with it, right?
Yeah.
But it's just putting it out there. And oftentimes they go, oh, cool. Or, yeah, we don't have any issue. And then sure, like what you said, usually it's a couple months, but they'll circle back and go, hey, that's interesting. What do you,
Yeah.
And that is how we move the conversation forward.
Awareness. You're just bringing awareness to what you're doing yourself, and then the movement that you stand behind, and allowing them to. It's a difficult topic. It's a difficult conversation, and for someone to finally realize and have that kind of inward reflection of, man, I really do want to get better in some way. It's a recovery. It's a healing thing. I've never.
Yeah.
I'm blessed that I just thankfully wasn't in an environment that brought me down like that. And, but it's hard for me to feel totally like I can relate in this conversation. It's almost a little bit uncomfortable. Sure. And so I'm going to lean on you a lot to help our audience out through this. What I do want to do, you mentioned it briefly, and I have it in one of the questions here is, you kind of told me this prior to us recording today, but if it wasn't for those 4 arrests that you had in 3 years leading up to your 21st birthday,
sure.
You felt that you may still be battling with your addiction, but with both drugs and alcohol. Do you recall when you had kind of a shift, a mindset shift, and maybe it was a stated denial that you were in, to now a service mentality? Can you kind of recall when that happened?
Yes. Getting arrested for people is one of the most traumatic, hardest things that a lot of people will ever go through. Losing their family, losing their house, losing their job. It is one of the hardest things to go through, but I often talk about how important and how grateful many people that go through that situation, when they come out on the other side, they're so grateful. And here's why, Mike. If I make good money, I show up to work, I'm a business professional, or I've held a job for a long time, or I have a nice family, it is very difficult to convince one that they have an issue. And I often would say the money and the profession are oftentimes the last thing to go. Particularly for men, successful men, we've always heard the term of functioning alcoholics and drug addicts. Mm-hmm. Mental health is just as insidious, because there's so many people out there that from the outside look like they got it all together, but you don't know that at night they want to kill themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's very difficult as a man or a professional to tell me that I have a problem with anything I'm doing outside of work when I show up, I make good money, and I crush, right? This happens oftentimes with performers, They know. Yeah. Everybody knows they got
rock star to it. I mean, to interrupt, but they got the whole world, but there's still a void. There's a void.
And even when they have these moments of like, damn, man, I'm really, I might need some help. Then they go out on stage that night and crush, and everybody goes, "You're amazing." They go, "You know what? Yeah, I'm good, man. It's all good." And so, getting arrested, when you get arrested, it's very difficult to say, I don't have an issue. Now, anybody can get arrested once. Like, there is the vast majority of people that drink alcohol have gotten behind the wheel when they maybe shouldn't have. Meaning, not that they were swerving, but they were over the limit. And if they got pulled over, they would get arrested.
They did the act that would have caused them to get arrested. Right. They just didn't. Not everybody gets arrested. Or
they're carrying something illegal on them and they're driving around, right? And they don't get caught. But here's the thing. Most people, when they get in trouble or they have some sort of consequence, whether it's medically, whether it's professionally, whether it's in the home, around relationships or at work, they pep talk themselves. They go, you know what, I'm going to cut back. And they actually cut back. Or they say, I'm not going to do that again. And they don't do it again, right? Mm-hmm. They say, my family's too important. And they actually do it. Mm-hmm. Whereas a drug addict and alcoholic, particularly like myself, I was just doing what I saw. My parents, they were business professionals. We hung around people that were both blue collar and white collar, but they all showed up to work. They were all wear alike. They didn't get in fights and they didn't get arrested. And so in my mind, I was just doing what I kind of grew up seeing, and I was unlucky. But one time is one thing. And then the second time, you're like, well, maybe. The third time, you're like, I don't know. The fourth time, I'm literally sitting in the back. My third and fourth arrests were 4 months apart. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting in the back of a police car. And the first thought that I had was, finally, someone's going to help me with my using. And I didn't think I had a problem. I didn't know what alcoholism or addiction was. But I was like, man, now, what am I doing? Number one, why do I keep ending up here? If I am doing what all my friends are doing, why do I keep ending up in the back of a police car? I didn't decide. I wasn't saying I'm going to quit, but it was harder to deny when you get arrested, you lose your house, you lose your job, you lose your family. It's harder to deny when people have these big catastrophic events. And your average person will kind of keep it moving and make some changes, but a lot of people don't. And so it was through that process of being forced into treatment and being forced to go in to see the probation officer weekly, knowing I could I was on the verge of going to jail, and I was still drinking and using drugs every week. And I was, going to see my probation officer once a week. I was in treatment. And it was service is a huge portion of, the 12-step recovery groups that I went into. And I also think that that's a lot of people miss out because the average person doesn't speak and talk the way that I'm talking now about the stuff that I talk about on the podcast, or when we have these more intimate conversations around, marriage counseling, or, it looks like I know what I'm doing, but I'm terrified. I feel like a little boy and I'm insecure, that it's very difficult to feel bad for yourself when you're out being of service to others. It's very difficult to be depressed and anxious when you're out serving the community, right? Whether that's, being in a rough area, helping out, or, you're helping your old neighbor, right? But so many people, they kind of get away from that. So the blinders go on, their world gets smaller, all their issues become, major issues. And, the self-obsession begins, and that could come in the form of drug and alcohol addiction. It could come in the form of, feeling like a piece of crap and being depressed and thinking about, ending your life when in the overall scheme of things, there's nothing wrong. And I think that's one of the things that's really happened and highlighted with the COVID shutdown for the vast majority of people is, not being able to go out and shake people's hands and say hello and be out in this normal environment. Their world has gotten smaller, and if they don't, even keeping in touch with people virtually isn't enough for a lot of people. And so it's been an interesting deal. But again, it's hard to be self-obsessed and to think your life is not going well when you're out serving other people that need help.
Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight, and Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. Man, that's so good. And I don't want to speak and make too many blanket statements here, but I do agree with everything you're saying here, and especially with COVID. It's like, one of the things I learned about depression is all it really needs is time. Like if you give it empty space, right? Like if you don't have a lot going on one night, that could be the night that the depression seeps back in. Because if you're busy and you got a lot of purpose and you're purpose driven and you're helping someone out, the neighbor needs shoveling or whatever. We both live in cold areas. So we can relate to that. Like just, that you get a call from someone and they need you to give them a lift or whatever. And when you're like, you have that feeling and fulfillment of just helping someone out, it's really hard to like put yourself down or be depressed. And it's also just being up and moving around. With COVID, I think a lot of people, their insecurities are at home maybe where they're like hidden. They're not showing it in front of everybody. So if now they're living more in that environment and they're not at the water cooler at work where they used to just get away, they just wanted to get away and talk to a friend. A lot of people kids going to school was escaping a bad home life sometimes. And now they're stuck doing school from home. And who knows if those parents are even allowing them to have the right education. It's a very difficult situation. Also social media too. Something to go way back to an early statement you made, is that comparison tool. It's like so many people are living in this comparison mindset right now, and you don't always know what someone's really going through. But you could look at their IG and be like, man, this guy's on vacation every other month. You don't know. Some of these pictures are from like 2008. People are reposting whatever. And you start to knock yourself down. I wish I could go there. I'm not going there. Man, look how happy he is with his kids. You don't really know what's going on 12 hours a day, Sunday to Sunday. But whatever's posting on social media isn't always a true reflection. I think that's super important for the audience to realize and remember. And
here's one thing about that, Mike, and I know it's very easy to social media is challenging because we have so much more access. I mean, we're in the information age. We've got access to so much information. You want to learn to do something, you can find it on YouTube. You can at any given moment keep in contact with people, going back to that 150 rule. Right. I got thousands of friends on Facebook, right? But this stuff has been happening since the beginning of time. I'm from the South, and so a lot of people go to church, and I say that church was our first Facebook. Because no matter what was going on at home, whether dad was acting a fool or mom was drinking herself into depression or the kids were on Sundays, you better straighten up, tuck your shirt in, do your hair, and you better show up with a smile. Yeah. And so we didn't go to church as growing up, but we had that with being out in public. My mom was a hairstylist. My dad was a newspaper publisher. We knew that if we stepped outside the house, we were going to run into people that we knew, whether it was, friends or professionals. And so, what goes on in this house stays in this house, and you better, smile and look good and whatever. So this has been happening since the beginning of time. We talk about Gary Vee's one of my favorite business guys. And he says, we talk about, social media is so bad. Everybody's on their phone. And then he shows those pictures of the guys on the subway, and they're all got their head in their newspaper. It's just, we've been doing it. We've been doing it forever. I think one of the biggest things is, what is it deep within you that causes you to compare, right? Part of it is the human condition, right? The human condition is, we're always looking for ways to be safe and to create certainty, right? We're always, plotting and we see things from our view. Call it self-centric, call it the ego. But it's not, give me a strategy not to compare. What my question would be is, let's dig a little bit deeper and figure out what you're insecure about, what you're scared about, what is making you feel, have a low self-worth. And I think that is where the solutions lie. Look, 3 steps on not comparing people, or 3 steps to confidence, or here's 10 steps to grow your social media. Those are great. But my question is, you can give me the 10 steps to grow my social media, but if you don't feel worthy of success, if you don't feel good enough, if you are addicted to chaos because that's all you ever know, even if you are able to enact those 12, those 10 steps to growing your social media, eventually you're either going to quit. It's going to be so difficult because you're doing it for the wrong reason. Or even if you are successful, which is actually even worse, now you're stuck because you tried to do this thing to look a certain way and to fit in, but you never, address the innermost self.
The inner self, baby. Because that's right. Yeah, like you can get that. Oh man, I got 100,000 followers. That's going to be the moment that everyone cares what I have to say. If you don't care about how you feel, or if you actually feel good doing what you're doing, then that number is literally just a number, and it's even building into the facade deeper, I feel like. And really, like, it goes back to that fulfillment thing where someone may leave a job, try to go to another job, thinking that the job is going to solve their problems, but really they would just had a purpose disconnect. And until they got that things figured out, the other thing is not going to solve it. Or it's a relationship. You dump someone, you start with someone else, and like it just becomes this ongoing problem when there was an inner deal that you needed to kind of iron out yourself, right?
That's right. And that happens in the 12-step recovery rooms. We talk about geographical cures. You know, so many people say, you know what, I just need to get out of here. If I could just get away from my friends or get out of this crap hole or get out of this situation, then everything will be okay. Mm-hmm. But the same thing is true for drug addicts and alcoholics. It's true in business. It's true in relationships. I could parachute into a place I've never, ever been to, and I will find other people that drink, use, think like me, right? That act like me. And I get out of this relationship. One of my favorite relationship mentors says in any long-term relationship, you'll come across very difficult issues, right? Mm-hmm. And you got two choices. You can either deal with the issue or you can go get another relationship. But here's the deal. In every long-term relationship, you're going to end up dealing with issues that are hard. And so what people, whether it's business, relationships, social media followers, these are all outside fixes, right? I'm looking to use things outside of me to change the way I feel. I'm looking to social media followers, a certain number in my bank account, affirmation, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to feel this hole in my soul, this yearning of wanting to feel like I'm enough. Mm-hmm. I just want you to tell me I'm okay, right? And so many people, they're seeking these outside things. But here's the thing, Mike. When do you ever hear anybody talk like this? No, most men, most people don't talk about low self-worth and insecurity and masculinity and what is it within me that causes me to procrastinate and to quit. And even when people say, they give me everything that I asked for, and yet I still don't feel satiated. What is that? And so those are the type of conversations that I like to have. And I think that's the way we normalize how hard business is, how hard relationships are, how hard life is, the human condition, that you don't have it figured out. And I don't have it. It's really difficult for me and it's easy for you. That's BS, because we don't go deep enough to realize that.
Is vulnerability is something that really connects people together. Like we talked about in that group environment, getting vulnerable, you connect with one another. And I feel like most of the people that you mentioned, Gary Vee and many others, they get super vulnerable with their content and just kind of let the real world out. And they're the most connected with, they're not really hiding much as far as we know. But I do feel that the friends we make and the business connections we have and the people on LinkedIn we actually get on a Zoom call and get to meet, it's those that actually open up, tell their story, get a little bit vulnerable like you're doing on the show right now. That's when people are going to get the most value, and not just surface level, kind of like the webinar version. That's why I do podcasts, because it's like really digging deeper into the layers. And most people that come on the show are looking to help others out. And the best way we can help people out is with our personal experiences that we actually can talk about. I'm not going to stand over here and try to educate you on something that I didn't personally do myself, But if I get vulnerable, then someone's going to listen to that and actually connect with it better.
I think one of the things that I like about what Gary Vee talks about is I just did one of my last podcasts was called, I think I said, do you have a dysfunctional relationship with your goals, dreams, and desires? And what I mean by that is Gary Vee talks about, being on purpose, doing things because you love them, because, entrepreneurship is hard. And if you're not passionate about it, you're going to quit. And so how often have I said the right things, sounded vulnerable to the average person, been of service, but deep down, I was doing it for a selfish end result. I was doing it so I could get more followers. I was doing it so you could give me a pat on the back and say, wow, Preston, you're so vulnerable. And that is one of these real, insidious things about the human condition and personal development is, where is my motive? And my motive changes. I mean, this is the best thing that I can compare it to is if you think of someone in your life, and let's say they're older, 50, 60, 70s, and they've been eating healthy and they've been active their whole life. Not one time does someone come up and say, Mike, you've been working out your whole life and you watch what you eat and you don't eat donuts and, you eat half portions. That's so great. Don't you think it's about time you quit doing that stuff? Like, why do you keep going to the gym, Mike? Why do you keep taking care of? Nobody would ever say that.
Right.
But when it comes to personal development, when it comes to, kind of combing back through my generational trauma in childhood or going to support meetings, like AA or NAMI for mental health groups, people go, Mike, come on, bro, you've been doing that for a year. Why you got to go back? You can have one, and so it's this lack of understanding. And when I talk about, health, the health industry, when people are actually healthy and they go, would you ever walk up to someone and say, why do you keep eating heart healthy food? The answer is obvious. You wouldn't do it. But everything else, it seems like people go, why are you still doing that? Come on, hadn't you figured that out? So I think that there is which Gary talks quite a bit about, is journey, not the destination. He's not the first one to say that. But
sure,
at any given moment, Mike, I don't feel good enough, smart enough, big enough, fast enough. Like I don't. And so at some points in my life, I feel really secure and I'm confident. And the very next day, I could feel like a piece of crap. And if I'm not consistently setting up routines that involve getting closer to the, I talk about higher power or spirituality or being one with the universe or God, whatever that looks like. If I'm not building my relationship there to try to stay right-sized and whole here, no matter how many shoes I get, no matter how many followers I get, no matter how many listeners I get, no matter how many pats on the back I get, it's never enough because I'm looking for these outside things to change the way I feel. And I think the next relationship will do it. The next business will do it. The next sale will do it.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that was huge, man. So many good moments, a lot of mic drop moments in there. What I want to do too is make sure with your time on the show today, we also utilize your resources. I know you're in an outreach program at a local hospital in Ohio, but also you wanted to come on the show to speak to the audience that may be in a spot right now that they're struggling. And if it's with drugs, alcohol, or any of the things that you can help us with today, what resources are available? And then also, like, what I want you to do is talk about the first step. So if someone's literally never reached out in confidence to someone to say, I need some help, and they're listening right now, what's the first thing that they can do?
Yeah. So the vast majority. So what I do professionally is I do outreach for a mental health and addiction hospital, right? So if someone goes to the emergency room, let's say they want to hurt themselves, they're suicidal, they want to hurt someone else, they've overdosed, they're really, really sad and depressed, they're losing sleep, they're, all this kind of stuff. One would go to the hospital, and then that hospital would call a mental health or addiction hospital, and they would send them over, and they would get what's called stabilized. And once they're stabilized, they would step down into a group program like partial hospitalization. That's 5 days a week, groups 5 days a week under the kind of medical umbrella. And they step down to 3 days a week. And then counseling is like maintenance. Once a week, counseling is maintenance. The vast majority of people will never need that. 90% of people, all they need is a basic counselor, maybe a therapist, a coach, something like that. So the first step is to maybe call your insurance company and say, hey, what counselors are on my insurance? Or look up some organizations. I'm a big fan of free support groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. Al-Anon is for the families of. ACA is a family group, Adult Children of Alcoholic and Dysfunction. NAMI is a really big one, NAMI, NAMI. They are for
Alliance of Mental Illness, is it?
What is it? Yeah.
National Alliance of Mental Illness.
Yeah, and they are big supports for people that struggle with mental illness and families of. And this is if I leave you with anything, Mike, is it's going to be this: if you want to be a plumber, you got to hang with plumbers. You want to be a hairstylist, you got to hang with hairstylists. So if you want help in your marriage, you have no business asking your divorced single friends about marriage advice. If you want help with your depression or maybe talking to someone, you have no business talking to your buddy who's never seen a counselor in their life, right? So we have to hang around with people that have trudged the road before us, right? And if you're too embarrassed and ashamed to ask the people around you, there are ton of people, tons of resources that you can go to that are just online. And most of the time it starts with going to see a counselor or going to a support group. You can always reach out to me directly. I would be happy to have conversations, whether it's most people reach out for their friends and family. It's usually not them. But I also want to, and I don't want to scare people away, but I'm a big advocate of family recovery. One of the most hypocritical things that you can do in a relationship or in a family or in a friend circle is say, Mike, you're really a bad drinker, or you're this, you need to go change and then come back and be in our family. So you're messing everything up. The way you change the people around you is by changing you. And so if you want to change your spouse, you need to start changing through counseling, through working on your own insecurities, through digging down to see.
A big thing in fitness too, like couples who one person's struggling with fitness. If both of them get on a plan and they're both eating healthy and they're in the car together, they're not going to be forced to go to the fast food outlet because, like one person might do that if they're flying solo for dinner, but together
it's helpful. Kind of but what's also crazy, what's also you have to be careful with is it's also can be codependence. You go, I'm not going to do it unless you do it. We can do it. We'll hold each other accountable. And then 6 months later, you're off the rocker, right? Off the wagon or whatever the case may be. It's nice to be doing it with someone. But what I'm talking about is instead of worrying about what my spouse is doing, every relationship, whether it's eating, whether it's business, whether it's relationships, whether it's drugs and alcohol, everybody in that support group, we have a way of being with each other. It's like throwing a ball. I throw a ball to my wife. She responds in the way she always responds. She throws it back to me. Before you know it, there's tension in the room and but what happens? And I'm saying, wife, you need to change. And she goes, husband, no, you need to change. You need to get on an eating plan. If you would just not go shopping and bring the Twinkies in, we'd all be fine. So everybody's telling everyone else to change. But what happens if I take that ball and I put it in my pocket and I start doing the changing? In other words, I don't need you to do anything different for me to change. And so I start to go to support groups, start working with the counselor. I start working with the health coach, right? I don't need you to not go to McDonald's. That's it. What often can be is people are trying to strategize against their thinking and they go, well, if we're both on it and we both don't go, we'll both be successful. Not true. You have to work on those under layers, right? Those insecurities, the self-worth, what is it within me that acts in these certain ways or always falls back on this old behavior? Because even if you're able to do it for 2 months, 6 months, 2 years, if you don't make the inner changes, you're always going to end up back to where you were and often worse. And so that is a big bit about, if you want to change, the number one way to change your family is by changing you. The number one way to change your health is by changing you. The number one way to change a relationship is by changing you. And there's a ton of resources. Again, I talk about stuff on my podcast. I'm always open via email or Instagram or whatever. And
I have that on the screen too. On Instagram, it's at @KPrestonMoore. And it's Moore. Facebook That's is right. k.preston.moore. And again, the podcast is The High Cost of Anonymity, and it's available Apple, Spotify, Google, and all the popular podcasts, as well as here. Is that a big focus on your show? Is the topics that we covered today, or tell us a little bit more about your podcast?
Yeah, so it started off with I just started recording. My entire podcast was recorded on my cell phone. There's nothing fancy. I record it on Anchor. I put it up. It sends it out. I post it. But I think here the vision that I had was I like to kind of journal, meditate. I got struggles that I've been working on for years, and so what I do is when I journal, or when I'm working with someone or have an aha moment, I share it. I say, hey, here's what I'm struggling with. The last one I did was admitting that I have a dysfunctional relationship with goals, dreams, and desires. I say I want something, but my actions don't reflect it, right? And so I'm talking about these type of things. And a lot of it is a glimpse behind the scenes on my own relationship journey, parenting journey, and personal development journey. And then I also have people on that tell their story. We have long form conversations like this, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. And my hope is that if you hear someone that's struggling with something, that it might give you permission to say, I've been putting this off long enough. Maybe my first step is to hire a life coach, right? Maybe you're too embarrassed to hire a therapist. You hire a life coach. That's the first step. But when you're involved with a counselor, a therapist, a coach, a support group, that is a prevention tool. You don't have to wait until you're suicidal to ask for help. You don't have to wait until you get arrested to stop drinking, right? You don't have to wait until your marriage is on the verge of divorce to ask for relationship advice.
Right.
Here's a news flash for you, Mike. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing. Everybody's trying to figure it out. We're all just trying to make the best decision we can in the moment.
Yeah.
But because we have these blinders on, and most people don't talk in the way that I'm talking right now, we think, again, going back to the biggest issue that we have as a society is, I think everybody has it figured out and I don't. I think everybody's got it easier, and they're happier, and their relationships better, and their kids are better. It is. I think that it's a way that people kind of stay in themselves. It's a form of self-loathing. It's a form of
sabotage, almost
self-sabotage, self-deprecation. Here's what's interesting. I did a podcast on perfectionism, right? And so if you would have asked me, Mike, are you a perfectionist? The answer is unequivocally no. But what I learned about perfectionism is perfectionism shows up in two ways. Your traditional perfectionism, which what my wife does, very organized, always over-prepared, box checker, everything looks great. Conversely, I'm messy, right? I wait to the last minute. I leave things undone, right? So I would say she's a perfectionist. I'm not. What I learned was if I have low expectations, if I set low expectations for you, if I leave things undone, if I'm messy, you won't expect me to do anything. So it's like this reverse perfectionism, right? She goes over the extreme of like wanting to be so totally together. I go the other way because I don't want anybody to have any.
It has some intent.
I don't want anybody to. I want to I don't want you to expect too much out of me. Therefore, anything that I do is usually like a kind of a surprise. But the roots are the same, Mike. Perfectionism is just a form of insecurity. That if everything is perfect, I will be able to compensate for my low self-worth. If nobody has expectations for me, Mike, then they think I'm a piece of crap. I think I'm a piece of crap. So why even try? The symptoms are different, but the roots are the same.
I got you.
And so anyway,
there's a lot there. I want to unpack a little bit of it, and then we got to fly here. But
sure,
talk about people, and it's common that they struggle with reaching out and getting a coach, or being willing to almost personally admit it, even if others don't know you're going to a counselor. You do know it, and you kind of look at yourself in the mirror like, why am I seeing a counselor? but the best athletes, business people, everyone has either a coach, a mentor. The top of the top performers in the world work with a coach. Michael Phelps won 8 gold medals. You don't think he had someone coaching and mentoring him?
100%.
The best, you got the Super Bowl is this upcoming week as we record. Everyone on that team has personal coaches, the actual head coach of the team. That's one thing. So if someone's listening to this, they're kind of struggling to get a counselor, think of it as like your personal coach or more of a mentor than it is just a counselor, because that word might sound condescending. The other thing is, don't compare your day 1 to someone else's day 100. Because
100%.
like if you get started and you're just thinking, man, I see this guy, they got it together. They said they were doing this program and they just seem to be getting it better than I do. You don't know what they looked like on day 1 typically. Mm-hmm. So the most important thing you can do is get started. We named a number of them: AANA, there's NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And as you talked about, there's no shortage of information today. Go on Google and they can reach out and find you again. Appreciate your time here. I'd like you to give like one more kind of final statement if you'd like. Usually what I do is it's a message to leave our audience inspired to be brave and bold in pursuit of their dreams. If you wanted to deliver that, or if you wanted to relate it more back to overcoming struggles, however you want to form it. But what would be your summary message to our audience today?
I would just say, nobody's got it figured out. Even the people that look as if they've got it figured out, they still oftentimes feel unsatiated, right? It's this idea that very easily, I think that if you've got it together and you're professionally successful, and you look the part, that you don't have insecurities and you don't have self-worth issues. It's just not true. And so I go back to this idea of, I want to make counseling and therapy and support groups as common as hiring a personal trainer or going to a yoga class, right? Mm-hmm. And so the number one first step for you to change not only you, but to change your family, to change your inner circle, to change the friends that you hang out with, is by working on you. And why not go on a path of personal development to kind of, seek those things and see what is it within me that is causing me to end up in the same place, or to have self-doubt, or to self-sabotage. And the answers might surprise you. And the more Me Too moments that we can create, the more that you're going to help the people around you. And so, you can be the change that we need to see. And it starts in your backyard, in your home, with your, in your workplace, in your church. It starts with you, and you're important, and you can do a lot more than you think you can do.
Extremely well said. I love that quote too. Reminds me of the quote by Gandhi: be the change that you wish to see in the world. And that's what you're doing, man. You took your situation, and instead of playing the victim, you said, man, once you kind of figured it all out, took some time, but it was the 4th arrest where that's the moment you realized, hey, this isn't an accident. This didn't happen 4 times by chance. The first time, maybe it felt like you were unlucky. The 4th time you go, I'm doing something to cause myself to get here. You still were working on getting through some of those inner workings. But now eventually, I say now eventually, that doesn't really make sense. But now we can reflect on where you eventually ended up, is what I'm trying to say. And it's in a place of helping others get to where you got to. And you're like, man, it took, like, your road was real squiggly because you had to figure it out for yourself. And you're like, man, guys, some of these doors are open. I want to point you towards them so you can get there a lot quicker, get the help you need a lot quicker. And again, nobody is ever a finished product, like you said. I really love that send off. Thank you so much, Preston Moore. This was awesome. This is one of my favorite conversations because it was so real. You didn't come in calculated. You came in and delivered so much insight. So appreciate your time today.
Sure, man. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
I love you guys, and thank you so much for tuning in. Check out more show notes and information on each episode at mikeduppodcast.com, MIKED uppodcast.com. We're powered by Social Chameleon. You guys know what to do. Be great and be grateful. Next level.